Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for turning up in this magnificent town hall. It's wonderful, isn't it? Yes. And it says something about Grimsby. It says Grimsby used to be a great place, but that Grimsby is now a bit down at heel. And I wonder why that is. I wonder what's gone wrong. Could it be anything to do with Ted Heath signing us up to the common market 40 years ago, giving away our territorial waters? But to bring you more up to date, our revered Prime Minister from 1997 to 2005, the oh-so-popular Tony Blair. Oh, I've misread the audience. I must have got that one wrong. Tony Blair, you may have seen, intervened in politics yesterday. He said that we should not have a referendum on the European Union because it was in our interests to remain a member of it. Well, is that the same Tony Blair that said if we didn't join the single currency, this country might be severely reduced and all our businesses would leave? Is it the same Tony Blair who promised us a referendum on the European Constitution and didn't deliver it? And is it the same Tony Blair who has now made millions of pounds out of the very giant corporate companies who work hand in glove with the European Union to the detriment of ordinary working people? I think it is, don't you? And what Tony Blair ought to do, he ought to come to Grimsby. He ought to come to Grimsby and meet some of the people I've just met in the street. Because what has happened to this place is a tragedy. There is no better or more glaring example of what a total mistake this European project has been. Now, please do not misunderstand me or take me out of context. I am not against Europe or the European nations or the European people. Far from it. It's a great place to go on holiday. Some of us, well, it is. Some of us quite like drinking the wine. I'm rather well known for that. I mean, I like Europe so much, I'm even married to one of them, all right? So we've got no problem with Europe as a place or the European people. But we've got a massive problem with the European Union, with political union, with all these countries being tied together. Because what happened here was we joined something as a result of joining the common market called the Common Fisheries Policy. And we did that at the very moment that we lost the Cod War against Iceland. Losing the Cod War against Iceland was a big blow to a town like Grimsby, but the result of the Cod War was that in 1976, international territorial waters were redefined. Pre-76, 12 miles was the limit that any nation had total control over. Post-1976, that became 200 miles. And what we have done is the very opposite to what they've done on the other side of the North Sea, to what they've done in Norway. And in Norway, they have a 200-mile exclusive economic zone, and all the fish that swim and spawn in those areas are the possession of the Norwegian nation. And Norway has a thriving fishing industry. And the fishing industry there employs tens of thousands of men and women. And what we have done, as a result of membership of the Common Fisheries Policy, we are now allowed to catch less than 20% of the fish that swim in British waters. The other 80% we've given away to the rest of Europe. And that is why Grimsby has now been reduced to 15 fishing boats. That is why all the filleters and all the processors in this town import either 80 or, on a bad day, 100% of their fish in from Iceland and Norway. Have you noticed Iceland and Norway are not members of the European Union? And when Britain leaves the European Union, Grimsby once again will be a great fishing port. Now, last week I took part in a televised debate against the other leaders. One or two of you may have seen it. And it's pretty clear to me there are now only two parties in British politics, because the other six represented professional, career, political class. It's a political class that has become so politically correct that it is so bound up in our membership of the European Union that it actually doesn't believe that we should put the interests of this country and the people of this country first. And I say shame on them, because they may shout at me, they may throw abuse at me, but the fact is, if you don't run your own country, if you don't control your own borders, you're not the master of your own destiny. You know, we had immigration in Britain running from 1950 up until 1998 at roughly net 30,000 people a year. Now, because of the open door policy, it is 300,000 people a year coming into Britain, and we have no control over it whatsoever. And the impact has been that young mothers can't get their kids into the right primary schools because there simply aren't the places. The rest of us struggle to get a GP appointment or find ourselves waiting ever longer at accident and emergency. But the biggest casualty of open-door immigration has been ordinary men and women and their families, people earning average wages, people earning the minimum wage, because what has happened over the last 10 years is their wages have been driven down by this massive oversupply in the labour market. The beneficiaries have been the rich. The beneficiaries have been the big businesses. The beneficiaries have been the big landowners. And we're told on the television that this is a good thing because the gross domestic product of our country has risen. Well, what is the point of the gross domestic product of this country rising if living conditions for ordinary families have gone down? Something must be done. Now, 77% of the British population want to take back control of our borders. And interestingly, every single ethnic group in Britain agrees with that proposition too. But the only party that can offer a positive solution is UKIP. It's UKIP. We want a referendum on our membership of the European Union, and we want it as soon as possible because we want to take back control of our borders. And when we've done that, we've got the positive solution going forwards. What we want to put into place is the Australian-style point system so that we can choose the quantity and the quality of who comes to our country. Isn't that the solution for the future? So I believe on this, the single most important issue in the minds of electors, it is only UKIP that is telling the truth. It is only UKIP that is offering a positive solution, and the establishment are terrified of us. They're so scared of us, they've decided there's no point going for the bull. They're going to go for the man instead. And that is why they throw out endless abuse, saying that we're extreme and racist and bad people. It is not racist or extreme or bad to want to control your borders sensibly and to make sure that immigration once again becomes a positive in our country and not a negative. It is the right thing to do. And we also want to inject some honesty into the debate about the economy. OK, Mr Cameron tells you there is growth in the economy, everything is fixed, and you're all feeling the benefits of this so-called economic boom. I bet you're really feeling it in Grimsby, aren't you? Yeah, quite. The point is, folks, that this coalition was put together to reduce the annual deficit, to reduce the annual overspend down to zero. That was their objective 5 years ago, and it is still running, at £90 billion a year. Let me put it another way. When David Cameron became Prime Minister and George Osborne became Chancellor, our accumulated national debt, that's the debt we've been running up since we fought Napoleon, etc., our accumulated national debt was £850 billion. It is now £1.5 trillion. They have doubled the debt. They've doubled our national debt in 5 years. They've increased our national debt more than Gordon Brown managed to do in 13 years of Labour rule. And the truth is this: we cannot go on living as a country substantially beyond our means. Already, the debt repayments on our debt are bigger than the defence budget, and in a few years' time will be bigger than the education budget. And all of this at a time when interest rates are at rock bottom, down pretty close to zero. Of course, we've got growth in the economy by running a debt like that. You know, if you max out your credit cards every month, your lifestyle will improve, but at some point you've got to pay the bill, haven't you? So what UKIP are doing is offering some practical solutions as to how we can get this government debt down. We want to stop paying a net £10 billion every year to the European Union. We want a relationship with Europe based on trade and friendship, but not to pay £55 million a day to Brussels, who haven't signed off their accounts for 19 years in a row. That's a good start. And we then want and we then want to deal with what David Cameron says has been his proudest achievement in government. And in this, he was complimented by Ed Miliband. They say that the fact that we now give more money in foreign aid than any other Western country is something we should be proud of. I bet it warms the cockles of your heart, doesn't it, to know? Right, well, we want to cut £10 billion a year from the foreign aid budget, all right? And we want to end what is known as the Barnett formula. Or as I described it to Nicola Sturgeon's horror last week, stop shoveling money over Hadrian's Wall because it's not fair on the English, all right? And we want to stop this bizarre vanity project that is called HS2 at a time when the country is skint that might cost us up to £70 billion. An end to that. But we do want to spend some money. And what we want to do is to make sure that everybody working in this country who is earning the minimum wage is taken out of a tax system altogether to give people incentives to get off benefit and to get back to work. And there's one government department where overall spending needs to increase, and that is our defence budget, where successive governments have run down our army, our air force and our navy, frankly, in a way that I think is shameful. We're not in a position to defend ourselves. We're certainly not in a position to defend our sovereign dependent territories like the Falklands. We need to spend a little bit more money on defence. Not to do so in a very uncertain world is rather like saying, I won't pay the house insurance next year because I don't think there's going to be a fire. Well, it's okay if there isn't a fire, but it's a disaster if there is a fire. So we want to increase defence spending to 2%, and we want to make sure that not just those that are currently serving have the right equipment and have the right battle groups, but we also feel the way successive governments have treated our men and women that have come back from Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere, some physically impaired and some mentally impaired, frankly, has been shameful to this country. And we would like to appoint a veterans minister. We would like to open up a specially dedicated military hospital, and we'd like to open up some hostels. We'd like to open up some hostels to former servicemen and women who've fallen on hard times. You know, 1 in 10 of the people that sleep rough on the streets of this country every week have at some point been in the armed forces, and the least we can do as a country is to repay some of the debt that we owe them. Now, last year we achieved amazing things. We won the European elections. We then had 2 members of Parliament who left the Conservatives and joined us, but on a point of principle resigned their seats, put themselves up for by-election on the basis, as they both said, that ultimately it's the people who are the boss. Wasn't that refreshing to hear language like that from politicians? But we now go into a general election, and this is the highest hurdle in politics that I've yet had to jump. In fact, it's a bit like Beecher's Brook that the horses will have to face this Saturday. It is a big hurdle for us to climb, but we can do it. Remember, neither Cameron nor Miliband is going to form a majority. One will be the biggest party, but neither can form a majority. So it'll be a bit like it was in 2010. It'll be the other parties that ultimately decide the makeup of the next government in 10 Downing Street. And I believe we've every chance of UKIP being part of that mix. I have every reason to believe that we can find ourselves on May the 8th in a position of influence, in a position to change things. Please don't misunderstand me. I don't want to sell out. I don't want a ministerial car, but I do want to drive the agenda in British politics in the next 5 years. And we will use whatever influence we have in the House of Commons after May the 7th to try and make sure that the British people are given a full, free and fair referendum so that we can decide who governs Britain and Tony Blair can go to hell. All right? I thought they'd like that.
Wow. Thank you for that, Nigel.